Why do certain people seem to attract others' attention effortlessly, while others, despite giving everything they have, remain in the shadows? The answer doesn't lie in textbook charisma or social tricks learned over a weekend. It lies in something older and more uncomfortable, a deep understanding of how human nature really works, an understanding that most people prefer not to face. For centuries, thinkers from different traditions have observed the same phenomenon, almost paradoxical. Those who need external validation the least are precisely the ones who receive the most of it. This is no coincidence. It's the result of psychological patterns that repeat, identical in every era and every culture. Think for a moment of human relationships as an invisible chessboard, where every gesture, every word, and even every silence leaves a mark that goes beyond the instant in which it happens. Those who understand this game know that true strength doesn't lie in constant pursuit, but in controlling your own space and in the ability to hold a certain tension without showing all your cards right away. This difference ends up shaping the destiny of personal, professional, and romantic relationships. We live in a world that rewards immediacy and total availability, and it's precisely there that a paradox emerges, which few want to admit. The more accessible we become, the less value we seem to have in others' eyes. It's as if there were an invisible law of perceived value, a law according to which whatever is always available loses its shine, while whatever is rare and selective gains a particular weight. This isn't some recent cultural whim. It has deep evolutionary roots. For millennia, scarce resources determined survival, and the same mental patterns continue to operate today, even though we're no longer hunting or gathering. Contemporary society has sold us an appealing but ultimately harmful story, that the path to recognition comes from always pleasing others, from being endlessly available, from giving without conditions. Those who followed this script to the letter discovered sooner or later a bitter truth. Their efforts became invisible, their dedication was taken for granted, their presence lost its impact because it stopped being a choice and became a silent obligation. It turned into background noise, indispensable but unnoticed. This narrative has created entire generations who confuse submission with love, availability with worth, and people-pleasing with respect. The transformation I want to talk to you about today doesn't come from manipulative techniques or cheap psychological tricks. It comes from a principle that has guided leaders, artists, and thinkers throughout history: self-mastery as a necessary condition for influencing the world. When you learn to value your own essence, when you draw clear boundaries, and when you live from a solid inner center, something changes in the way the world responds to you. People who used to ignore you start seeking you out with an urgency you never imagined. It's not magic, it's psychology applied with awareness and a clear purpose. There's an uncomfortable truth that almost no one wants to face. We were taught that boundless kindness guarantees love, that always being available ensures loyalty, and that personal sacrifice always comes back in the form of gratitude. It sounds noble, but in practice it's the foundation of an invisible prison. Every time you say yes when you really wanted to say no, every time you postpone your own needs for someone else's convenience, every time you tolerate the intolerable hoping that someday someone will recognize it, you're feeding a pattern that, little by little, distances you from the life you truly deserve. This conditioning starts early. As children, we're taught that being good means being accommodating, that loving someone means sacrificing your own well-being, that setting limits is a selfish act. Parents, teachers, and authority figures, almost always without bad intentions, reinforce these patterns. They reward us when we yield to others' will, when we're easy to manage, when we don't cause problems. So, without realizing it, we internalize the idea that our worth depends on how useful we are to others, not on what we are in essence. The human mind works according to rules that often contradict what we've been taught. Contrary to what we've been told, people don't value what comes effortlessly. The brain is wired to appreciate what requires investment, energy, and effort. When you remove these elements from the equation, perceived value collapses along with them. That's why the colleague who never says no to an extra task rarely gets the promotion, while the one who sets boundaries clearly ends up being seen as indispensable. This programming has ancient roots, Our ancestors learned to value scarce resources and allies who couldn't be taken for granted. Anyone who was always available at no cost became predictable, and what is predictable stops being strategically relevant. Ignoring this means condemning yourself without meaning to social invisibility. In personal relationships, this dynamic becomes even more evident. The always available friend ends up turning into a constant that goes unnoticed, like the hum of the air conditioner you only notice when it shuts off. By contrast, those who keep a bit of mystery, who don't offer all their emotional availability right away, who maintain their own spaces in life, generate a natural curiosity that keeps attention alive. This isn't about playing games with anyone's feelings, but about honoring your own first. The culture of permanent availability has created emotionally exhausted generations, people who have turned their identity into an extension of others' needs. They live in constant alarm, measuring their self-worth by how quickly others respond, by how many invitations they receive, by the intensity of external recognition. They've outsourced their well-being, handing control of their happiness over to factors completely outside their control. This dependency isn't just unsustainable. It ends up driving away the very people they say they want to attract. The phone has become the perfect symbol of this new form of emotional bondage. Every notification triggers an automatic response. Every unanswered message generates anxiety. Every scene without a reply awakens old insecurities. This hypervigilance is exhausting and paradoxically counterproductive. The moment of awakening arrives differently for each person. Some experience it as a sudden revelation after a particularly painful disappointment. Others discover it little by little through small observations that eventually form a clear picture of their situation. But when it finally arrives, the clarity is unmistakable. They realize they had been operating from scarcity, begging for attention and affection, when in reality they had abundant inner resources that they kept hidden, both from others and from themselves. And this is where many men begin to realize something important. Attraction is not just about saying the right words. It is about the energy behind those words. Because when you communicate from neediness, people can feel it. When you seek approval, they can feel it. When your confidence depends on someone else's reaction, they can feel that too. That's why I left a resource for you in the first pinned comment called The Obsession Method. It's designed for men who want to understand attraction on a deeper level, communicate with more confidence, read situations more clearly, and stop acting from insecurity, not by pretending to be someone else, but by learning how to show up with more calm, more presence, and more intention. So after this video, check the first pinned comment and take a look at the obsession method. I know the case of a professional who for years was the perfect employee. She arrived early, stayed late, never said no to a new project. Yet, when promotion time came, she was overlooked again and again, while colleagues who seemed to work less advanced with a more solid, more visible presence. The realization wasn't gradual, it was immediate. She understood that her constant availability had been read as a lack of personal ambition, as if she didn't have an agenda of her own worthy of respect. This awareness marks the beginning of a transformation that goes far beyond any superficial technique. It's not about faking a new personality or following someone else's script. It's about reconnecting with your authentic essence, that version of you that existed before external expectations and social conditioning shaped it to their liking. When you start operating from that place, you stop needing external validation to feel complete, and almost paradoxically, it's precisely that emotional independence that makes you irresistible. The process of reconnecting with yourself requires courage because it means facing uncomfortable truths. You'll have to recognize how many times you betrayed your values just to maintain an apparent peace. You'll have to accept how many opportunities you lost out of fear of rejection. You'll have to confront how much time you invested in bonds that drained your energy without offering anything in return. Each of these revelations, however painful at first, brings you one step closer to real freedom. This honest introspection can feel devastating at first. It's like waking up in a room you thought you knew perfectly and discovering that you'd been living in the dimness for a long time. Patterns that seemed normal reveal themselves as dysfunctional. Relationships you considered stable show their unbalanced nature. Situations you tolerated suddenly become unacceptable in this new light. This awakening hurts, but it also releases enormous energy that had been trapped in dynamics that no longer served you. Real transformation begins when you decide to honor your time as the most precious resource you possess. Every hour is unrepeatable. Every moment is an opportunity that will never present itself in exactly the same way again. When this idea becomes part of you, your standards rise naturally. You stop giving your time away to whoever asks for it, and you start investing it with awareness in the people and activities that truly nourish your growth. This new way of thinking shows up in small but profound changes. You stop responding to messages instantly, giving yourself permission for your replies to be thoughtful rather than reactive. You set specific times of day to check your communications, freeing your mind from the constant bombardment of notifications. You learn to say, "Let me check my calendar," instead of committing on impulse. These are subtle adjustments, but they communicate something powerful. Your life has a structure, a purpose, and limits that deserve respect. Managing your own availability consciously becomes almost an art. It's not about becoming unreachable or arrogant, but about building a structure that reflects your real worth. When someone asks for your time, you weigh it against your goals, the reciprocity that has existed so far, and the real benefit to both parties. This isn't coldness or calculation. It's simply awareness. You know your energy is limited, and that's why it deserves to be invested with judgment. On a professional level, this transformation stands out in particular. Instead of being the one who accepts any extra assignment without question, you become someone who weighs each request against the real value it brings to your own growth. You start negotiating not just salary, but also responsibilities and hours. Your new attitude isn't aggressive, it's clear and professional. Colleagues and superiors start to perceive a new solidity in your energy, something that simply wasn't there before. This professional change requires a certain strategic finesse. You can't transform overnight without creating unnecessary friction. Instead, you reshape your professional identity little by little. You start delegating tasks you used to take on out of habit. You set time limits that didn't exist before. You communicate these changes with firmness and professionalism, explaining that you're optimizing your contribution to the team. Most superiors, when this is done well, end up respecting this new attitude. Personal relationships go through a similar revolution. You stop being the unofficial therapist of your social circle, the person who always has time to listen to others' problems, but who rarely finds willing ears when they need support themselves. You establish reciprocity as a non-negotiable principle. If someone systematically cancels plans, you stop proposing new ones. If a friendship has become one-sided, you let it fade out naturally instead of forcing it to continue. These changes might seem drastic at first, but they end up revealing the real quality of your bonds. On the romantic level, the transformation runs even deeper. You let go of the proving your worth mindset that ruins so many relationships. Instead of chasing, you become someone worth desiring. Instead of shaping your personality around what you think the other person wants to see, you present your authentic version and let real compatibility decide the outcome. This authenticity might generate fewer superficial connections, but it creates much deeper bonds with those who truly resonate with you. The world of modern romance is full of counterproductive strategies based on constant pursuit and the need to prove interest at every moment. Dating apps have intensified this dynamic, creating a scenario where total availability is almost always interpreted as desperation. Those who understand the psychology behind all this act differently. They build a rich, independent life that doesn't revolve around the search for romance. This personal fullness turns out to be magnetic because it suggests that a relationship would be a welcome addition, not a desperate need. The key to this entire new dynamic lies in understanding that respect isn't negotiated with words, but built through consistent actions. Every time you hold a boundary, every time you prioritize your own well-being, every time you respond calmly instead of reacting emotionally, you're sending a clear message about your worth and your standards. This message carries far more weight than any declaration because it demonstrates instead of proclaiming. The consistency between what you value and what you do is what generates genuine respect. People may ignore your words, but they can't ignore your repeated behavior over time. When you set a boundary and hold it consistently, you're saying something fundamental about your character. When you prioritize your own well-being without feeling guilty, you demonstrate self-respect. When you respond calmly in moments of tension, you reveal real emotional strength. These qualities are rare, and that's exactly why they turn out to be so valuable in a world full of reactivity and inconsistency. Strategic silence becomes one of your most powerful tools. Not the passive-aggressive silence that tries to punish the other person, but the conscious silence that creates space for reflection. When someone acts disrespectfully, your silence lets them feel the true weight of their own actions. When a situation turns toxic, your calm withdrawal communicates more than any speech could. This ability to walk away without drama, to disconnect without needing endless explanations, demonstrates an emotional maturity that few people possess. And when you understand the power of silence, you also begin to understand the power of timing. Because attraction is not created by talking more, explaining more, or trying harder. Many times it is created by knowing when to speak, when to pause, when to move forward, and when to let your presence do the work. That is exactly why I left the obsession method in the first pinned comment. It goes deeper into the psychology of attraction, communication, confidence, and social awareness, so you can stop improvising and start moving with more clarity. If this part of the video made you realize that your presence, your words, and your timing need to become stronger, click the first pinned comment and check out the obsession method. The power of silence lies in its ability to create space where there used to be only noise. In a culture obsessed with filling every pause, your comfort with silence sets you apart almost immediately. That silence isn't empty, it's full of conscious presence. While others feel the urge to fill every gap with words, your calm communicates confidence and depth. It's precisely in those silent spaces that the truest connections can take root. Discipline becomes your most reliable ally. Not discipline as punishment, but as the structure that lets you maintain consistency between your values and your daily actions. This investment in yourself isn't selfishness, it's personal responsibility. You can't give what you don't have, nor can you sustain healthy relationships starting from a place of inner emptiness. Over time, you notice subtle but clear changes in how others respond to you. People who used to take you for granted start showing more consideration. Those who used to cancel plans at the last minute start confirming in advance. Those who almost never reached out start doing so more often. These changes don't come from manipulation, but from a natural human tendency, valuing what cannot be fully controlled. Your new energy also attracts a different kind of person into your life. Instead of those who try to take advantage of your unlimited generosity, you start connecting with people who value reciprocity and mutual respect. These bonds feel different, more balanced, more sustainable over time. There's no constant drama, no lopsided power games. There's a natural flow of giving and receiving that nourishes both sides without draining either one. The emotional independence you build little by little doesn't turn you into someone cold or unreachable. On the contrary, it allows you to love and give from abundance, not from need. When your happiness no longer depends on others' constant approval, you can offer genuine affection without hidden expectations behind it. This emotional freedom turns out to be enormously attractive because people sense the difference between someone who gives from fullness and someone who gives hoping to fill their own emptiness. The fear of abandonment, which once determined many of your decisions, gradually transforms into confidence in your ability to move forward, regardless of external circumstances. This confidence doesn't come from arrogance, but from accumulated experience. You've learned to feel good with yourself, to enjoy your own company, to build a full life that doesn't depend on the presence or absence of another person. Patience becomes one of your most recognizable qualities. Not the passive patience that waits for the other person to change, but the active patience that allows things to unfold at their own pace. You stop forcing outcomes, pushing relationships in specific directions, trying to control variables beyond your reach. This ease, almost paradoxically, increases your appeal because people sense the absence of pressure and hidden agendas in every interaction with you. Your way of communicating becomes more effective precisely because you start saying less. Every word carries weight, and a real purpose. You stop feeling the need to fill awkward silences with empty conversation, and you stop over-explaining or justifying every decision. This verbal economy communicates confidence and personal authority. People start paying closer attention when you speak, because they know what you say has substance. External judgment loses its grip on you little by little, not because you become insensitive, but because you develop solid internal criteria for evaluating your own progress and worth. Other people's opinions become interesting information, but they stop being decisive. This freedom from external judgment allows you to take calculated risks, explore new possibilities, and show your authenticity without the filters that used to limit your potential. Adversity becomes a teacher, not an enemy. When you face rejection, disappointment, or conflict, your emotional world no longer collapses completely. You've developed the resilience needed to process those experiences and move forward without carrying resentment. This emotional strength is visible to others, who are drawn to your stability in an environment full of volatility. Even your physical presence changes, in subtle but noticeable ways. Your posture becomes more upright, your gaze more direct, your energy more centered. You no longer constantly seek approval on the other person's face because your validation comes from within. This solid presence turns out to be magnetic because people feel safe around someone who is comfortable in their own skin. The decisions you make start aligning with your real values, instead of being driven by fear or the need to please. This inner consistency creates a sense of integrity that others perceive almost intuitively. Your life becomes a genuine expression of who you are, not a performance designed to win outside approval. This authenticity is rare in a world full of masks. In the end, you understand that real power doesn't lie in controlling others, but in governing yourself. When you master your reactions, your emotions, and your decisions, you end up influencing your environment in a positive way, almost without setting out to do so. People naturally gravitate toward those who possess this kind of personal authority because it represents stability and genuine leadership without needing to impose it. Self-mastery is the highest form of power, precisely because it's the only kind no one can take from you. External circumstances can change, relationships can end, situations can get complicated, but your ability to govern yourself remains intact. That's where you find a confidence that doesn't depend on the fluctuations of the outside world. The path toward this transformation isn't a destination you reach once and keep forever. It's a daily practice, a series of conscious decisions that reinforce this new paradigm. Every day brings opportunities to choose self-respect over people-pleasing, authenticity over performance, patience over reactivity. Every right choice strengthens, a little more, the muscles of this new way of being. This daily practice requires conscious vigilance, especially in the first few months. Old patterns will try to resurface, especially in moments of stress. It's precisely there that your commitment to this new way of living grows stronger or weaker. Every small victory over old patterns builds momentum toward your new identity. This transformation also means building, little by little, a new circle that reflects and supports your evolution. This doesn't mean cutting off all your previous relationships abruptly, but becoming more selective about where you invest your emotional energy. Over time, bonds that no longer resonate with your new energy fade away on their own, while new connections, more aligned with who you are now, start to appear. This new version of you doesn't appear overnight, but every small change accumulates until it forms a complete transformation. One day you realize you're no longer the person who begged for attention, who tolerated disrespect, who sacrificed her own well-being for others' convenience. You've become someone who naturally inspires respect, who attracts genuine connections, who lives from a place of real inner abundance. And when you reach this point, you'll understand that it was never really about making yourself others' priority. It was always about becoming your own priority. Because when you live from that place of self-respect, the outside world simply reflects this inner transformation. Those who deserve your energy show up naturally, and those who don't fade away without need for drama or resentment. And if you want to take this idea beyond this video, I left the obsession method in the first pinned comment. It is for men who want to stop chasing approval, understand attraction with more clarity, communicate with more confidence, and become more intentional in the way they connect with others. Because the truth is simple. When you stop acting from neediness, your energy changes, your posture changes, your words carry more weight, and people begin to feel that difference before you even try to prove anything. So click the first pinned comment, check out the obsession method, and decide if this is the next step for you. Real attraction does not begin when you try to convince someone of your value. It begins when you finally start living from it. Thank you for being with me in this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.